Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 12. It's called The Wounded. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. So this episode is kind of our first big episode with the Cardassians, in terms of them being they've been mentioned, I'm sure, before. Or at the very least, Tara's mentioned enough to me about future stuff that I know the name so much that I think they have.
It might be that. I don't recall the name, although when I saw the main guy, I was like, oh, I know who this is. Like, I couldn't put a name to it or anything, but I recognize him.
The actor?
But at least this character. Maybe it's just this race. Maybe it's just the race. But I'm assuming this character comes up again. I don't know.
Okay. But here's the thing about this episode is that it's, if anything, it's an O'Brien-centric episode. If you had told me last episode that we were going to get more of his marriage to Keiko, I would have told you you're nuts. I was not going to see her again.
Yeah. It was pretty surprising.
And lo and behold, we have at least 2 different dinner scenes with them. The episode largely focuses on his past with the Cardassians, the fact that he fought in the war against them. It does mention at the start that Picard was also in said war, but obviously O'Brien's experience is more relevant to this episode. So that was interesting, just for a start. The gist of this episode is that there's a captain, Benjamin Maxwell is the name of the captain. Bob Gunton, the evil warden from Shawshank Redemption, for anyone who's keeping track here. He's basically started to do some sketchy things, because a Cardassian ship shows up, and even though they're at peace, fires upon the Enterprise, and when Picard gets the comms up, he's like, hey, what are you doing? Enough of this right now.
What the hell are you playing at?
Stop this nonsense. The Cardassian's like, well, this is retaliation for the Federation, destroying one of our outposts like yesterday. And he's like, what? And basically, it's like, give me an hour, let me, contact High Command, let's find out what's going on.
I like he phrases this at the end, and look, if we really have to fight, it's not looking good for you. So you want to accept this hour. Yeah.
And he does. He goes and finds out, and it turns out, yes, this Captain Maxwell has destroyed with his ship an outpost, and it's like, okay, accept the Cardassians, like a couple of them onto the ship, 3 of them specifically, and they're going to be able to supervise as we track him down and find out what he's doing and stop him, because we are at peace. And that's the thing that the Admiral here really emphasizes, is that this peace is really important. We're not ready for a war. At all costs, make sure this peace is maintained. And I thought that this episode kind of then took that statement, that clear kind of mission statement of the episode, and really played with it throughout. I liked how it, when it got to the point where there was moments where maybe it could have escalated into conflict in a number of some small ways, some bigger ways. I appreciate that it was always Picard's first objective was always to try and maintain peace, even if there was something that potentially was fishy or potentially could cause a conflict. Maybe justifiably in some ways, but the idea, no, peace is more important, and it's more about other things. But all this comes into play with this Captain Maxwell, who is essentially gone a bit stir crazy and mad. He was a big war hero in the war. He had a tragic incident where the Cardassians destroyed a civilian outpost which happened to have his wife and children on it, so he has a personal attachment to the whole thing. And when we eventually meet him, he's very clearly spoken, and it's not until he starts going on about what he thinks they're up to that he starts to sound maybe a little bit obsessed and crazy. Like, he's ultimately not found a way, as Picard puts it later, to find something to do in peace. That his mind is just gauged for this war, and it's never going to leave it.
Yeah.
But no, so I thought all the diplomacy of trying to stop this guy, and some of the hard decisions that Picard has to make, which we'll get to as we talk about it, but I happen to really like this episode. I think it's insane that O'Brien now has a better focus episode than some of the main cast do, but what was your feelings?
I think this is one of, if not the best episode this season so far. I think this is a fantastic episode. I have very little to fault with it. It does pretty much everything right.
Yeah, I would agree it's the best of the season so far. It's funny because I've been enjoying the season, and it's had some really solid episodes, but I did kind of feel like this feels like a really dependable season, which is still much better than 1 and 2, but it doesn't seem to be peaking as high as 3 as consistently. At least it hadn't yet. And then this episode I felt was the first one where I'm like, oh, this felt like it was really hitting some of these notes that I expect this show to hit.
Yeah, I was a little bit, because I couldn't remember off the top of my head if there was maybe a really strong episode earlier on. I'd have to go and look at the list, but This is definitely, up at the top of the season so far, I think.
It deals with a lot of interesting topics. You've got the prejudice against the Cardassians, which even at the start of the episode, Worf is already kind of like, I don't want Cardassians on this ship. I don't trust them. Let me put some guards up around. At least if I can't escort them everywhere, at least let me put some guards in sensitive areas of the ship. And Picard agrees to that.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, he agrees to that, but he's like, no, we're not going to be escorting them everywhere. They're not going to feel like prisoners. The whole point of them being here is that to show that we're open in this investigation, that we want to like catch this guy as much as they do, and stop any further bloodshed. And I thought that, especially with O'Brien, obviously, it does this neat job of kind of like setting up that he does have this like lasting hatred for them. It feels a little bit one note at first, but then it becomes a bit deeper once he actually talks about his experiences to the Cardassian. It's like sort of the engineer Cardassian who wants to kind of like compare like transporter like notes with him essentially, and like get some upgrades for his tech. And then there's also later when he himself has to be the one to talk down, because he used to serve with this captain. That's kind of the big detail that we've not mentioned yet, is that he served under this captain who's went batty, for lack of a better word.
Pretty closely, so he was his tactical officer. So it wasn't like he was just a nobody on that ship and just, I know him from, he was the ship captain, so by reputation, it was like, no, he was pretty directly with him. Yeah,
and he built up loyalty towards him. And when the subject comes up with Picard, he speaks very highly of him, and he speaks very highly of Picard too. Because I think one of the first kiss-ass things that he says is that I've been lucky to serve under the two best captains in all the Federation.
He would say that, wouldn't he?
But I really loved how it played with the idea that even once he admitted and agreed, because when he first finds out what Cardassian has done, he's like, or not Cardassian, sorry, when he finds out what Maxwell has done, he's very like, well, they must be up to something. He had a reason. He's very quick to kind of try and defend them and justify
and Picard takes him at his word, and when he does talk to Maxwell, he's like, well, look, what's going on? Have you got any evidence? Was there provocation? He's like desperate. Like, tell me there's a legitimate reason for this.
Yeah, and even if he assumes that he's right, and his information sounds sketchy at best, but let's just assume that he's right. It doesn't change the fact that he's not supposed to just go and do it himself without informing Starfleet. There's a chain of command.
And by all accounts, he may have been right.
That's the thing. We'll get to the ending when we get there, but
it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant in the context of what the story is really about. But having O'Brien be the one to have to argue against his former captain, ultimately, because Maxwell ultimately won't listen to anyone. He won't listen to Picard. He agrees, seemingly to be escorted back to Earth or the starbase, and he then veers off course. He makes a runner for it to go and kill a ship. Because one of my favorite scenes in the episode is halfway through, before they've caught to him, because they're trying to find him. They've tracked his ship, but they're going because they're going to Warp 4. Because one of my favorite moments in this whole episode, this whole scene, is they're going after him at Warp 4, and they've realised that he's going towards what seems to be, at least what the Cardassian is claiming, is a civilian science ship, and it's not like a military ship, and that he's heading towards it. And Picard at first won't give them the exact codes and location of the ship, because they know that, because the Cardassian's like, hey, we've got ships near, we can intercept.
They might be a bit hot-headed and fire a little bit easily.
And and I actually loved that moment with Picard, because eventually, as Picard's like trying to kind of explain his reasoning for like not giving him it, eventually the Cardassian says, so you're saying you won't give me the exact location? And Picard just smiles and says, no, I won't. And I appreciated that moment. But here, ultimately, Picard, when he realizes there's another Cardassian ship in danger, he agrees to give the location over. And we watch kind of on the screen, we get just the sort of the representation on the radar, if you will. It's not called a radar, but same thing. And we see that the Starfleet ship is like a very well equipped military ship, and it wipes out a warship, a Cardassian warship, which is pointed out right after the fact that it had 600 people serving on it, 600 Cardassians. And
again, this was a warship, yes, but arguably so was Maxwell's ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily mean that warship, the Cardassian one, was doing anything wrong. It wasn't like, doing anything provocative. It was just there, and it just happened to be a warship.
Yeah, well, yeah, for all we know. Well, I think it's not even that it just happened to be a warship. I think they intentionally sent the warship, because this isn't the ship that...
oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't intentionally the ship, because this is the ship they sent to intercept it before it got to anything else. Because it never actually gets to the science ship that we're talking about.
And if you're going to send something to intercept, you know, a Starfleet ship, you will send something with a bit of firepower, right? You know, to kind of make your point just in case.
But they're all kind of shocked when it just wipes out. No, because they don't know. We don't know, like, the way this played out. We have no idea if the warship was gearing up to fire first and Maxwell defending himself. It doesn't really matter. But given what he'd all just done with the outpost, it's not that far of a stretch to think that he might have just seen the ship and went, okay, fire, like, without any thought process. And what I loved about this moment is the feeling in the room when it happens. It feels quite dire, especially when he mentions there were 600 lives on board. And then Picard just asked Data, like, how long will we reach until we reach the ship? And he's like, at current warp 4, like 16 hours. And he just turns to the ensign and says, move to warp 9. And I love that line. That moment for me kind of sold like how serious this was. And then later on in the episode, when they do interact with the ship and he's refusing to, you know, Maxwell's refusing to talk back, he beams over first, they have the conversation. But afterwards, when he's fled the Enterprise is in pursuit, he's beaming, you know, making a beeline for this ship, the science ship that he's going to destroy, which he claims has got weapons on board, that it's not a science ship, that it's a military ship, and they're carrying weapons to whatever. And he's not responding to anyone. And Picard's like, okay, red alert, we might have to shoot down this ship. And he gets O'Brien on the bridge. He's like, get him up here, because, you know, he might be able to talk to him. He might at least be able to give us some insight. And as O'Brien himself says, look, let me beam across and try and like talk to him. Let me try and deal with this. And I think all these moments of diplomatic tension, or even just the moment where the third Cardassian is caught on one of the computers and it's kind of fishy, and Worf carts him into the bridge, and like both the head Cardassian and Picard are kind of pissed about it, but it's actually the head Cardassian who steps forward and sort of basically chews him for it, and then privately,
like, I'll punish him for all this. And you know, in the back of your head, you're still going, you probably told him to do a little bit of espionage on the sly while you were here.
I mean, they might have done. I don't even necessarily think it matters. If anything, I might even like it more if this was a genuine, just this one rogue Cardassian was off doing something. Just in the same way that Maxwell's this rogue Starfleet captain who's off doing something.
No, I get it. And I think it's this scene where they have the conversation about how there are people on both sides who don't want the war to end, but we can't let, you know, those people dictate that. You know, we have to make it, you know, rise above any one person.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing at the end, with after they've resolved the situation, is Picard has this final scene with the Cardassian, and he makes, you know, it feels very amicable because everything's like went well, you know, all in the fact that they, you know, lost that ship previously, but they've solved the problem, they've got the guy. But Picard says, but he actually is probably right, because one of the things that was happening, of course, is that Maxwell says, look, Picard, beam aboard that ship. Beam aboard that ship or I'll destroy it, just so you can see for yourself what's on it. Go beam yourself. And Picard refuses. He says, no, I'm never going to do it. I'm not going to beam aboard that ship. And in the final scene, he says to him that, says to the Cardassian, that Maxwell's probably right. Where this ship was going, and the fact that it had, like, not cloaking, but it had, like, you know,
it's a particular shield.
Yeah,
and the fact that the outpost, the quote unquote science outpost, is positioned in nice, easy tactical range. There's all these things adding up.
Very strategic location. There was enough there to suggest that maybe he's onto something, even if he was acting crazy about it. And the Cardassian's like about to deny it, and Picard just sort of cuts him off, says, it doesn't matter. Like, my mission here was to keep the peace, but we are going to be watching. And it's this kind of idea where they kind of have a right to arm up if they want. Like, if they want to have a big military, that's on them to do that. But it's this idea that, look, my mission here was to keep the peace, and if you likewise want to keep peace and not escalate anything, then, you know, that's why I chose not. Because if I went onto that ship and I saw these weapons,
he'd have to report it.
Yes, and it would have to lead to some sort of escalation. So just the fact that you have weapons isn't necessarily a bad thing. Starfleet has weapons. You know, they both have weapons. They're the militaries, essentially. But it's just, I don't know. I really like the nuance to this.
I did too, and I think it is, you kind of know in the scene where it's all, you know, the standoff's happening, you know that this, you know, Maxwell probably is right, because the main Cardassian Gull, I want to say his name was, at no point does he go, go ahead, beam over. See for yourself that everything's fine, because it's probably not, and he knows that. And he's very lucky that Picard had a very level head.
I even kind of like the idea that maybe even the Cardassian Gull didn't even know for sure. Like, it's not a thing where it's not like it's his like job to know exactly what every ship is. It's just in his head, he's like, that could be something they shouldn't see. But he doesn't know for sure.
I like it both. I like the idea that maybe I think he's an interesting, complex character already. That maybe they are arming up for war, or not for war necessarily, but just in case, in the same way that many nations across the history of the world have done, right? Maybe they are, but I also believe that scene where he says, he says to Picard, "I believe you want peace, and so do I." I believe him there as well. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think it's very possible he can think we should be ready just in case, and also want the peace, and be very grateful that Picard is a level-headed man here and doesn't just beam over and escalate things.
Yeah, I think part of this is to kind of give the Cardassians some layers as well, because the third Cardassian, the engineer Cardassian, who tries to make small talk with O'Brien kind of not yells at him, but blows up at him in the lift a little bit, in the turbo lift, where he says, "Look, if I'm asked to give you information from my superior officers, I'll do so, but who I spend my free time with is my choice." And it's actually later, after he's had, because there's a moment where the Cardassians first beam across, where Troy kind of turns and looks at O'Brien, because you can clearly sense that what he's feeling. It just does this little like dun 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 moment when they exchange a look. But he goes to the 10 forward and apologizes to this particular Cardassian, and it tells the story of this outpost where he arrived at this place where Maxwell's family were killed. It was a sneak attack by the Cardassians, and the Cardassian who's there says it was a mistake. Like, we had information that place was a military operation or something.
Not too dissimilar to what Maxwell's claiming. Yeah,
kind of actually, yeah. But it wasn't. But O'Brien tells the story about how he was there, not obviously when everything started happening, because he'd be dead too, but he came in after fact in the aftermath and tried to like save people. There were still Cardassians there, and he tells this story of like fighting a Cardassian, and this woman thrown him a phaser which was set to maximum, and the Cardassian just evaporated. And because up until this point in the episode, it was like, okay, he hates the Cardassians, and I can tell that we're maybe going to get either some sort of mutual respect by the end. I kind of appreciate though that it wasn't as neat as a bow as I thought it might be, because Star Trek's definitely done stories in the past, and they're very valid to do, where you'll have two opposing sides that by the end of the episode will see each other's point of view and come to some kind of mutual understanding or agreement and grow as people. I kind of appreciate that this gave us some of those elements in terms of the layers of that both sides have sympathy and empathy, but it didn't neatly all kind of like resolve it by the end. There's still tension, there's still possibility of more conflict down the line, which I think is important, because I happen to know that Cardassians are a big deal in Deep Space Nine. So
sure, and I do think this scene is actually really important for O'Brien here, for what happens at the end when he goes across to talk to Maxwell, and Maxwell's like, they're bloodthirsty, they just want to kill us all. And he's like, they're the enemy, they probably think that about us. And I don't think he would have had that response if he hadn't sat down and, had this drink.
Yeah, we should admit, I think the most important part of that drink as well is when he talks about how he doesn't hate the Cardassians directly. He hates them for what he had to become in that war.
Yes, because he'd never killed anyone before that.
And that was a big deal. And it instantly makes you, because I think even though they're in a war, and naturally two opposing sides who are in a war might feel sketchy about each other for a long time, especially if you were actually actively fighting in that war, he does come across, I don't want to say racist, but there is kind of like a sort of one-note bigotism to it.
At first, yeah. I get where you're coming from.
But when it gets to that scene and he talks about why he feels the way he does, that no, I had to become a murderer because of the fight that you put me in.
Yeah.
It became a lot more sympathetic, where I'm like, okay, you know what, I understand why he feels this way.
Yeah, same. And I really appreciate that the other Cardassian doesn't like hate him because he killed, one of his side. It's like he understands, the situation there, it was a war. People on both sides were being killed. He would have killed someone from the Federation if in the other scenario. So it's not like he's holding that against him either, which I think is really interesting to see.
I think my worry maybe when I realized that we're setting up sort of like an ongoing tension with the Cardassians in this episode, is, or at least I say worry. It's not like I had time to really worry about it, but I guess in sort of a hindsight, what a worry could have been is that, oh, we're doing another alien race where there's like possible wars in the future. And we kind of did that with the Klingons in the original series to some extent. Obviously that's long done because we've got Worf on the ship and we're doing different things with them. But the Romulans are kind of in that territory, and there was maybe a concern perhaps that it could feel a bit similar. This episode made me feel very confident about the Cardassians though, because it feels a lot more nuanced, I think, than even the Romulans do.
I think it helps that they have we don't know too much about their culture, really. We know little bits, but there's these handful of characters were quite complex and well formed, that it gives you some depth immediately. You project onwards, because I think, on the premise, it's clear they definitely wanted a Klingon stand-in, right? The war finished not long before the show started, and tensions are still high. I think they're closer to Klingons in that sense than Romulans.
That's fair.
But I do think that, just within this one episode, it differentiated, at least, if not the war itself, it differentiated the approach that we're going to take going forward with it.
For lack of a better term, these Cardassians, 2 out of the 3, which is impressive given that you had 3 of them, and 2 of them ended up being quite well formed by the end of the episode, is that, for lack of a better word, they felt very human. Like, I saw things, I saw qualities in them that were actually admirable, and I understood where they were coming from.
Yeah, I think you're inherently on the Federation side, so to speak, and, skeptical of them at first, because, that's kind of what we're trained to do in these stories. That's the expectation. I think the moment where the leader's like, 600 people just died, and he looks devastated. And it does, the show does treat it with the appropriate, gravitas that should.
And I think
that's
that's
the moment it humanizes them.
On that point, I think we should probably commend the performance of the actor there, especially since he's doing that through a lot of makeup. I feel like his reaction to that moment sells these characters so quickly in one episode, where I'm already at the point with the Cardassians where I've got kind of that feeling, and I hate to use this because it's comparing it to something that's like a 10 out of 10, but it's almost that science fiction feeling that I get from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where there's 2 sides that I now want to find peace. I don't want them to go to war. I want them to actually come to some sort of like peaceful outcome. And I'm sure, and what I imagine a lot of Deep Space Nine is probably going to be now is like the tension of that.
In this line.
Yeah. If not, just having the war, which it may, because it's a whole show, so it may happen.
It may break into war at point. Yeah. I assume at least at first it'll be kind of this. It's Deep Space Nine that O'Brien goes to, right?
He does, yeah. He's one of the regular cast in Deep Space Nine.
That'll be fascinating to kind of bring this baggage along with it.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, is what really interesting is. I don't know if they were even remotely planning for Deep Space Nine yet. I know Deep Space Nine starts the same season that season 6 of Next Gen's on, so I don't know if season 4 they were already starting to think about it, and maybe
it's possible,
or if this was just something that they kind of like how like Wrath of Khan. It's not like they planned that movie when they wrote that episode Space Seed. It was just years later they went, hey, we can make something out of that. So I wonder if this is the same thing where they looked at this episode and went, hey, we can expand O'Brien and we can use that history.
It's close enough time-wise that it could be either.
It really could be. Because I think it's smart. Because especially, I mean, it could have been a case of where they said, we're going to do a lot more with the Cardassians in Deep Space Nine. Oh, why don't we bring O'Brien? Because O'Brien has a personal conflict.
I wonder if, this was almost a backdoor pilot in the sense of not even in any official capacity, but almost, this is what we're going to use as our pitch, as part of our pitch meeting. We're gonna write this into the season. No one will even question it. But we're going to use this as part of our pitch for when we're pitching Deep Space Nine in 6 months' time or whatever.
Yeah. And for the record, I don't mean to imply that the Cardassians are the sole main plot of Deep Space Nine. I believe there's a lot more as well, but I've heard them mentioned enough in relation to Deep Space Nine that I know they're a relatively
recurring thing, which is fine, yeah.
And for the record, I was curious. Keiko is not only back for at least another 6 episodes of Next Gen, she's in 19 episodes of Deep Space Nine, so... Okay.
Oh, she'll pop up here or there.
Yeah, O'Brien's wife is here to stay, ladies and gentlemen. I am very surprised. Did you enjoy their 2... I mean, obviously they were there to talk about differences in cultures. It was almost a little bit too on the nose how thematic this was to him coming eye to eye with the Cardassians, in the sense that he's coming eye to his wife who's from a different culture about food. Like, it was almost a little too on the nose.
I think my biggest problem is these 2 have obviously known each other for a while at this point.
Actually, there was a line in particular in the first scene with them where he's got this, she's given him this fancy vegetarian dish or whatever it is, and he complains that he's not a fish and blah blah. But then he eventually says, I've been thinking, like, since you've been introducing me to all this great food from your culture, how about I do the same? I mean, isn't that what marriage is all about? And I thought to myself, no, it's not. Like, if anything, the sharing of like simple things like what you eat is more of a early dating part of the relationship.
And that's kind of what I was getting at here. Like this whole idea of, oh, you don't know what food I like, feels weirdly late. I mean, it's I kind of want to let them off the hook because we've only met her for like one episode before this, so it feels relatively new to us as a relationship. But if they want us to believe this is a relationship that has been going on for a year, 2 years, whatever, and we're at the point of recently married, make it believable. Make me think that they've had these conversations before, that they know what food each other likes.
Do you know what? I'll give them a bit of a pass here because, as is pointed out in the scene, we're in a different era where either of them will just go to a replicator and get whatever they want, right? So they'll both just sit down. She'll get what she wants. He'll get what he wants. And it's because he even mentions, she makes a big deal about how the fact that his mother would make actual meals, like cook.
Oh, no, I get that. But more just, okay, sure, they've always just ordered their own food and just eaten their own food. You're telling me that the couple have never gone, oh, I'll pinch a bit of that. I'll try some of that from the opposite plate.
If you were O'Brien and you looked across and saw that in her plate, would you be wanting to pinch a bit of it?
Well, maybe not. Maybe not.
And she's equally a bit, perturbed at the potato casserole that he whips out later.
Looks good.
I've never had potato casserole. This is an Irish thing, clearly.
Yeah, it is. She goes, it looks heavy. I'm like, yep, stodge is the word.
I wasn't particularly fond of either of them. I mean, I like potatoes, but potato casserole looked a bit...
Oh, it's good.
Did you say kippers? I think you said kippers were on it.
Possibly? I don't know. You can put all sorts in a potato casserole. It's a very versatile dish. That's kind of the point. You got your base with your potatoes and your gravy sauce, and your veg, and then throw in whatever you've got available. That's kind of the point of those basic meals. Is they're very versatile for that.
Mm. All right, I'll take your word for it. Maybe maybe I'll try a potato casserole at some point. So anyway, but I mean, so a bit on the nose, but I was surprised and I appreciated that she wasn't just never seen again after their wedding. So fair play.
Yeah, and it was only a couple episodes. Was it 1 episode, 2 episodes ago, that wedding?
That was literally the last episode. It was
the last episode. I couldn't remember if it was 1 or 2 ago. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously, they were very aware that people would probably have this critique of we should see her again.
In fact, when I clicked on the actress to see if she was in more episodes, she was literally just in Milan. So she's still going strong.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. I'll probably watch it when it hits Disney Plus, and I think it hits at the start of November.
Something like that. Yeah, it's not too long anyway. No, I think this show giving O'Brien this much time is very commendable. It was always kind of nice to see him start to recur earlier on, and it was like, oh hey, it's nice to see a recognizable face. It was because he was very similar to, I'd say, the bridge crew in Discovery, and that he wasn't a main character, but you always saw his face, so it was kind of like,
I would love if we could get to this level of character with any of the bridge crew on Discovery, and I don't think it's impossible because there's plenty of time. Even
the trailer for season 3 at the end of that first episode had. It gave them lines in the trailer, so I mean, maybe it's just because they're good trailer lines, but maybe we will get a little bit more of some of them.
Because they were definitely better in season 2 than they were in season 1.
It's the sort of thing where they could just like, oh, this is Detmer's episode, and just surprises out of nowhere. Like you could almost get Data's Day, but for Detmer, and that would be kind of like a fun idea. Yeah, I mean, they could do that.
I'm all for that.
And this wasn't quite that. This was actually still a larger scale Picard level like situation. It's just
Picard had a lot to deal with in this episode.
Yeah, he had a lot of great scenes. But it is fascinating that they not only wrote this episode for O'Brien, but they gave him essentially the final speech that convinced the antagonist to step down. Like he got that big scene.
What we would typically refer to as a Picard speech.
Yeah, and I thought it was handled very well, and there was that camaraderie where eventually Maxwell sort of said, "I'm not going to win this one, am I?" He's like, "No, you're not." It just it was a good scene, and it didn't feel like it was lackey. It felt like it was natural for it to be who it was, and I didn't find, maybe just because there were so many good Picard scenes in this episode anyway, but I didn't find myself lacking and going, oh, it's a shame that Picard couldn't do the speech this episode, that it had to be O'Brien.
I think the only thing I would have liked, in terms of just other characters having moments, is Keiko interacting with maybe Riker, who we know does some cooking. Like if O'Brien's like, hey, when they're talking about that at the start, if O'Brien kind of offhand, hey, Riker does his own cooking too. It's not that weird, and maybe and maybe this can still happen, but her kind of bring it up with Riker in the future, be like, what you cook? Why? Just have something like that.
She handled real meat.
yeah. Just
but
stuff
actually,
like that I'd appreciate.
One of the points that I don't know if it's a mistake per se, but she pointed out that what they were eating was healthy. And I was under the impression that in Star Trek times, the replicators, whatever you got, gave you whatever you needed health-wise. Like, even if you got like a cheeseburger at the replicator, it was still giving you all the stuff you need for a daily diet.
There's a difference between nutrition and health. The stuff, it will give you all of the nutritional values you need. So it might, this isn't giving you enough protein, so it'll boost the protein levels artificially.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still eat too much, and it can still be unhealthy food by having, it might not cut down the fat content that much, for example. It can still, there's a difference between nutrition and health, is all I'm saying.
Well, no, I would assume it would cut down the fat content. I was under the impression that it meant that no matter what you wanted, if you wanted to get 10 ice cream sundaes out of that replicator, you'd be fine.
I imagine there's a setting that says you can do that, but I'm sure there's a full fat option, which O'Brien's using.
I questioned that a little bit. That's all I'm saying. I'm sure we'll get. I mean, she's in a good decent number of episodes now, so I assume that we'll see her interact with other crew members.
I hope so.
But no, I thought it was a great O'Brien episode. I thought the Cardassians' introduction here was surprisingly deft, because it gave them layers. It made them feel like they're not just this one-note antagonist. It made me care about the conflict, and it left me excited for more. So, kind of a win-win all around on that front. There's very little to actually critique, and I think also a smart thing again, but to not feel like O'Brien was just a bit of a prick on his own, by making it clear that Worf also doesn't trust him. Even Riker has a comment at one point when Worf is arguing that there should be some security level for them. Riker sort of steps in and basically says to Picard, I agree with Worf. There should be something done. It shouldn't just be free reign.
It's very clear. No, this was a war. It wasn't easy. There is lingering animosity, and that's natural on both sides, right?
I think it's a really smart thing though, because you start off with Worf, who is kind of the quickest to not trust everyone, because he always says that about any. So
you don't think too much about it.
And then you get O'Brien. It feels like he's been kind of harsh, but I think once Riker, not only when Riker kind of agrees with Worf, but he agrees with them when he's trying to convince the captain of something. So it feels like he really cares about it. He definitely believes
it's a serious issue.
Yeah, and he wants Picard to be aware that he agrees with them. So I think that clearly, through it's the rule of threes, having all three of those characters have some form of opinion that kind of lines up about this group of people makes us realise just how widespread it is, and it's three very different characters as well, which I think is important.
Yeah, it makes it feel like it is just the standard cultural opinion rather than an outlier from O'Brien, for example.
So simple little touch. But a very, very good episode. Best of the season so far, I would agree with. So let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Liking is super important on YouTube, and it is the best way to show us that you like the content and you want it to keep coming. And to ensure it does keep coming, you wouldn't like it if we just stopped in season 5 episode 4, would you?
No. But more importantly, what's coming next week?
Hold on, I'm threatening them to hit the like button.
The threat was there. It was implicit. I'm sure they took it on note.
I'm not trying.
I watched a video earlier where someone said, if you don't hit the like button, that person might become a nurse and not and then not treat someone. So there was a whole weird logic of threatening your family members in hospitals by not hitting the like button. I can't remember the exact chain they got to.
I mean,
but it was a whole thing.
I thought I was being funny with the threat to stop. That's actually quite a dark threat to say I will become healthcare giver and then let your family die. It was a
really light-hearted video, whatever it was, and then there was just this thread, thread of getting to, letting people die if you don't hit the like button. I was like, okay, that went places.
I'll threaten to stop reviewing things, but I'll let you all know right now. Like or dislike, I promise not to murder any of your family. You can take that to the bank.
So, I mean, it wasn't really murder. It was just letting them die. There's a difference.
Murder by proxy.
Manslaughter at best.
Anyway, yes, what is coming next time? Yes. As Connor is so quick to intervene.
Yeah, I want to know.
All right, well, next episode is called Devil's Due. And this is the description. While answering a distress call, Picard finds himself not sure of exactly who he's dealing with, but he's sure he's not dealing with the planet's version of the devil, as she claims to be. Oh. This one sounds original series levels of nonsense.
Yes, a surprisingly religious take for Trek. In we haven't really done much of that in Next Gen.
No, which actually makes it kind of unique. So I'm actually kind of curious to see, even if it ends up not being that great. I'm curious.
Yeah, see what the take is on it.
Yeah, there's potential here. I could do something with it. So we'll see. But yeah, so that's coming next time. You can, of course, support us, though, with monies, if you can, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month. And that'll get you some bonuses. $5 tier, of course, gets you early access to these Trek reviews as well as some other stuff. So please go and have a look over there and see if you want to support us that way too. Otherwise, catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek somewhere out there. Somewhere out there. There's a Wesley Crusher, and he is in complete control of the ladies.